A mochi moment from Mark, who writes, I just want to thank you for making GLP-1s affordable. What would have been over $1,000 a month is just $99 a month with Mochi. Money shouldn't be a barrier to healthy weight. 3 months in, and I have smaller jeans and a bigger wallet. You're the best. Thanks, Mark. I'm Myra Ahmed, founder of Mochi Health. To find your Mochi moment, visit joinmochi.com.
Mark is a Mochi member compensated for his story.
Ever notice how ads always pop up at the worst moments? When the killer's identity is about to be revealed. During that perfect meditation flow. On Amazon Music, we believe in keeping you in the moment. That's why we've got millions of ad-free podcast episodes, so you can stay completely immersed in every story, every reveal, every breath. Download the Amazon Music app and start listening to your favorite podcasts ad-free, included with Prime.
You're listening to DNA ID, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, Missing Persons, Scene of the Crime, Zodiac Speaking,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime, Campus Killings,
and
Killer Communications.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
On June 1st, 2003, a human skull and mandible were found off of remote Forest Road 4410 in Hood River County, Oregon. According to a June 6, 2003 article in the Columbia Gorge News, Hood River County Sheriff Joe Wampler said the skull was found by activists from Bark who were checking the boundaries of a disputed timber sale in the Mount Hood National Forest. Instead of property line markers, they found skeletonized human body parts. The discovery of the skull, of course, precipitated additional searches of the area for more body parts. A cadaver dog team from the Marion County Sheriff's Office was brought in to search the area where the skull and mandible were found. But after 4 hours, Charlie, a border collie mix, had found only a few bone fragments of indeterminate origin. No large bones, hair, clothing, or anything that could help identify the person. Sheriff Wampler told the Columbia Gorge News he was disappointed, saying, quote, "We didn't find anything that's going to help us." But he wasn't giving up. Per the article, quote, "He plans to organize a crew next week to form a human chain and comb the woods around Surveyor's Ridge and the Dog River trailhead. We want to find the rest of the remains and any clothing or other evidence that might tell us a little bit about who we found here," he said. A preliminary assessment by an anthropologist determined that the skull belonged to an adult Caucasian female, likely between the ages of 18 and 40. Wampler told the media that early estimates placed the skull and mandible in the woods for a year or less. From Columbia Gorge News, quote, "Our best guess is that it was placed there last fall or summer," said Wampler, who believes the unknown woman was the victim of foul play. He said that professional opinion is based largely on the facts that there has not been any recent filing of a lost person in the area. When we find remains with no report of a missing person, then we have to start thinking homicide, he said, end quote. Wampler said these small bone fragments had been shipped off to a forensics team in Portland to determine whether they belonged to an animal or a person. After searches of the area were completed with nothing other than the bone fragments being located, the investigators turned to their best clue, the teeth in the skull and mandible. The Jane Doe had had significant and unique dental work consisting of crowns, fillings, and root canals. The Hood River County Sheriff's Office asked several dentists to review the dental work, and they noted that the dental work was done with cheaper materials, perhaps indicating that the Jane Doe could not afford superior dental care. In attempts to identify the Doe, the agency arranged for dental charts of her teeth to be prepared and disseminated for comparison to missing female reports throughout Oregon and in neighboring states. The dental scans were even released publicly, but no tips were called in. This was not entirely surprising, as the sheer number of women having been reported missing in Oregon alone in the 2001 to 2003 timeframe numbered more than 100 women, according to the Hood River News. Further, Mount Hood was a common area where people went missing. In December 2006, an official search for the climbers Brian Hall, 37, and Jerry Cook, 36, was called off. The body of a third climber, Kelly James, age 38, was found. Hiker Kenneth Budlong, age 45, disappeared on Mount Hood in September of 1995, and Karoli Orsi, age 24, of Budapest, Hungary, was believed to have fallen into a crevice above the Tilly Jane campground in September of 2001. Further, the Jane Does were not the only unidentified body parts found. I thought this article would be about her, but it wasn't. This is from Columbia Gorge News in 2006. Quote, in addition to now having 3 missing climber-hiker cases on the books, Sheriff Wampler has human bones recovered from Mount Hood that have yet to be identified. In July 2001, the weathered skeletal remains of an adult male were found on a steep slope of Heather Canyon. 2 employees of Mount Hood Meadows Ski Resort were picking up debris when they came across the lower jawbone with the teeth still intact. Several smaller bones were also located nearby, end quote. Scientists had determined the bones had been there at least 10 years. I think it's odd that this article doesn't mention the Jane Doe found in 2003, but who knows, maybe the article was trimmed for brevity purposes. In 2012, the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office uploaded the case into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System known as NamUs. She was case number 10671. A bone sample was also submitted to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. DNA was extracted and entered into the CODIS, Unidentified Human Remains Database. Unfortunately, no genetic associations to missing persons or family reference standards in the CODIS database were established. Reconstructions of the dead woman by famed forensic artist Joyce Nagy were made and publicized in both 2012 and 2017. By 2019, there had been 14 rule-outs in NamUs. It's a horrifying list of names of missing women in Washington and Oregon. It goes on and on. I'm not going to read all the names, but you can look them up on NamUs. In 2018, the Oregon State Police Medical Examiner's Office was awarded a National Institute of Justice grant to help pay for advanced DNA testing to help the medical examiner resolve its 30-some unidentified skeletal remains cases. By 2020, with the firm establishment of IgG, Dr. Nikki Vance, the Oregon State Forensic Anthropologist and Human Identification Program Coordinator, selected Mount Hood Jane Doe's case as one that could potentially be resolved by IgG. The Oregon State Police had a partnership with Parabon Nanolabs. The skull and mandible was provided to Parabon's partner lab to generate a SNP profile, which was done in October 2020. The phenotype predicted a Caucasian female with fair skin, dark brown hair, and green or hazel eyes. Parabon genealogist Christine Green was assigned the Jane Doe case. She uploaded the SNP profile to the open-source DNA databases GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. The results were underwhelming. The top match shared 131 centimorgans of DNA with Jane Doe. There were dozens of lesser matches, with centimorgans sharing amounts like 66, 62, 58, and several in the 40s. Ms. Green ended up using at least 42 matches in her research. One of the handiest tools she used was a matches of matches list, so she could see which of the matches were related to each other. Match 42 and match 5 shared DNA. Match 6 and match 15 shared DNA. And match 3 and match 1 shared DNA. Building all 3 distinct genetic networks back in time, the genealogist could see she was looking for a descendant of the marriage of Thomas Hayes, born 1796, and his wife Eliza Graham, born 1816, the marriage of James Marsh, born 1760, and his wife Angeline Connor, born 1769, and the marriage of August Bean, born 1824, and his wife Mary Gibbs, born 1836. In some instances, one or both of the marital partners remarried, and the genealogist had to use levels of shared DNA to predict which offspring from which relationships were the ones that were important to her analysis. For example, James Marsh had been married to a woman named Mary Horn. Match number 6, who shared 51 centimorgans of DNA with the Jane Doe, was a descendant from that marriage. James Marsh then remarried Angeline Connor, and match number 15 descended from that relationship. Remember, I said that match 15 and match 6 were related. They shared 19 centimorgans of DNA, as they were very distantly related half-relatives. Honestly, I don't know how these genealogists do it. Anyway, all this triangulation and reverse tree building led Ms. Green to a Diana H., who was a descendant of the Bean-Gibbs marriage and the Marsh-Connor marriage, and her husband Michael Dyer, a descendant of the Hayes-Graham marriage. This couple tied the genetic networks together. Further, Diana's parents had relocated from the Midwest to Vancouver, Washington. And Michael Dyer's grandmother, Annetta Newstrom, born in 1893, had also moved to Vancouver. Remember, Jane Doe was found on Mount Hood in Oregon. The Michael-Diana marriage was the nexus to the correct geographical region. Diana and Michael had married on June 27, 1966, when they were just 17 and 19 years old, respectively. Their divorce records from 1988 reflected that they had 4 children. 3 of them were males, according to Diana's Facebook page. And one of them, a girl, was born on December 9, 1966. Her name was Tisha Ann Dyer. She was a maternal half-second cousin once removed to the top match, consistent with the amount of shared DNA. And there was no proof of life for her after 2002. Further, public photos and descriptions of Tisha meshed with the phenotype predictions from Jane Doe's SNP profile. She had fair skin, brown hair, and hazel eyes. On July 22, 2021, Parabon delivered a DNA phenotyping and genetic genealogy report that listed a possible first and last name for Mount Hood Jane Doe, Tisha Ann Dyer. Based on the investigative leads from the genetic genealogy report, Hood River County detectives reached out to the family of Tisha Dyer, who said she had not been seen or heard from since 2002. A DNA sample was collected from her mother, and a kinship inference analysis was requested. On August 31, 2021, the medical examiner's office received a kinship inference report stating that the skeletal remains and the relative of the missing person, Tisha Ann Dyer, shared thousands of centimorgans of autosomal DNA. This amount and type of shared DNA have a 100% probability of being a close family relationship. Therefore, the identity of Tisha Dyer was corroborated through genetic means. Very little is known about Tisha's life. She was born 6 months after her teen parents wed, possibly a so-called shotgun wedding. Her parents went on to have 3 sons. Tisha attended Juanita High School in Kirkland, Washington. There's a 1984 yearbook photo of her at age 17 when she was a junior. And then there's a 20-year gap until she disappeared at approximately age 36. She had several addresses in the Portland, Oregon area before her disappearance, and her family verified that she was last known to be living in that city. But Tisha's name was well known to Multnomah County Police. Activities she was involved in and people she was connected to may have played a role in her mysterious death. Her criminal records spanned a 12-year period from 1989 to 2002. These were mostly for repeated property crimes like theft and criminal trespass, but she also had many drug possession charges and several traffic violations. Tisha had at least 7 aliases like Marguerite Badler and Marsha Lynch, and was possibly involved in identity theft, forgery, and other similar crimes. She had at least 1 conviction for giving false information upon issuance of a citation, likely a fake name. Then, in September 2000, Tisha was again arrested by Portland police. Police had finally caught up with a man suspected in at least 11 car break-ins resulting in stolen property that had been taking place in public parks in Oregon and Washington in the spring and summer of 2000. Lorenzo O'Neill Jackson, age 44, described as Tisha's boyfriend, was also arrested. Found in the possession of the couple were valuable items such as checks, credit cards, purses, CDs, jewelry, and cameras from the vehicular thefts. According to reporting from the Oregonian, Jackson was facing 49 counts, including criminal mischief, forgery, and identity theft. Jackson's rap sheet included convictions for promoting prostitution, compelling prostitution, first-degree forgery, criminal trespass, possession of stolen property, robbery, and at least 25 previous arrests for theft. He had been in and out of prison numerous times since the mid-70s when he wasn't yet 20 years old. From the Oregonian on September 14, 2000, quote, Tisha Ann Dyer, age 33, also of Portland, faces accusations of first-degree theft by receiving and possession of heroin and cocaine. Detectives say she had stolen property in her possession, end quote. At least 7 other people were implicated in the theft ring. Jackson and Dyer were living together in the 8000 block of North Ivanhoe Street in Portland when they were arrested. Jackson was on probation in Portland and also had a warrant out on him in Clark County, so he was in big trouble. I was horrified to read that when she was arrested, Tisha was 8.5 months pregnant. The baby's father was reported to be Lorenzo Jackson. Her bail was set at $80,000. I don't know what ended up happening with Tisha's baby, which must have been born within about 2 weeks of this arrest in September 2000. The Oregonian article reported that if she indeed had the baby while in custody, the baby would likely be turned over to relatives or placed in care of the state. Tisha pleaded no contest to first-degree theft on February 16, 2001, and the court notes say, quote, complete inpatient at Alpha House program and outpatient program, 24 months probation, end quote. In December 2001, Tisha was arrested for second-degree theft at a Home Depot and failed to appear in court on January 9, 2002. She was given 15 days in jail and 12 months probation. In February 2002, she was cited for a probation violation. A bench warrant was issued. Tisha was apprehended and arraigned on a probation violation charge. For some reason, after her court appearance, that probation violation charge was removed. But then, on April 2, 2002, another probation violation warrant was issued for Tisha. A warrant was issued for failure to appear in Multnomah on April 22, 2002, and this was served on Tisha. She was given conditional releases and several other warrants issued throughout the summer of 2002 until the last time she no-showed in September 2002. The record from the Multnomah Criminal Court says, failed to do WR, absconded. But it seems Tisha was alive for at least a month after that time. She had been charged with criminal trespass and third-degree theft in March 2002 in Clackamas County, and there's evidence from the court record that she was present for court proceedings there until October 23, 2002, after which a failure to appear warrant was issued for her. So Tisha disappeared completely from the legal system in late October 2002. The last public address for her in the area that I was able to find was in January 2002 and was listed as 938 North Gilbert Avenue in Portland, which was also an address of record for Lorenzo Jackson, who by this time was serving his sentence for the October 2000 car break-ins and the theft arrest. The last legal proof of life of Tisha in October 2002 meshes with what Tisha's family told investigators, that she hadn't been seen or heard from since 2002. Unfortunately, I have no more specific date, and it's unknown whether this familial contact with Tisha was by phone or in person. But we know she never appeared in court in Oregon again after October 2002. Tisha ended up dead in a remote area of Mount Hood in June 2003 and was estimated to have been deceased for at least a year. A press release from the Hood River County authorities states that Tisha was not known to be involved in hiking or any other outdoor activities that would have taken her to a remote location on Mount Hood. As for Jackson, he pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges and in February 2001 was sentenced to 52 months in prison under a law in Oregon that provided for stiff sentences for repeat property offenders. So Jackson was in prison for a 52-month term starting in February 2001. I reviewed his record and it appears he was not released from prison until October 8, 2004, and he then began probation. By 2005, Lorenzo Jackson was added again. I saw multiple charges of identity theft, and forgery starting in 2005. In 2006 and early 2007, Portland police published numerous bulletins alerting the public that they were looking for 49-year-old Jackson, who was wanted on identity theft charges. He was also wanted by the State Parole and Probation Board for various parole violations. He was well known to police in Portland and Vancouver for running identity theft scams dating back to the early 90s. The bulletins list Jackson as a registered predatory sex offender. He was finally apprehended on April 12, 2007. He was sentenced in July of that year to prison until June 19, 2015. He must have done most of that time because the next arrest I see for him was for possession and delivery of heroin in 2016. He was in a car accident in Vancouver in 2018, had arrests for possession of meth and possession of a stolen vehicle in 2019, and then had a final arrest for third-degree theft and criminal trespass in 2024. Okay, so all that is what we do know about Tisha's relevant run-ins with the law and her involvement with Lorenzo Jackson. Sadly, the list of what we don't know is much longer. Was there physical evidence of homicidal violence on Tisha's remains? Where was she killed? Was Mount Hood just a dump site? What remains exactly were found? Anything more than the skull and mandible? Were any articles or scraps of clothing, objects, weapons, or any other evidentiary items found? I don't have answers to any of these questions. I do note from the U.S. Forest Service webpage about Mount Hood National Forest that Service Road 4410 is called Lookout Mountain Road, and it leads to High Prairie Trailhead. Based on the Google Maps 360-degree viewer, there is literally nothing up there, and the road is seasonally closed from December 1st to April 1st. SUVs are recommended to navigate it even when open. My feeling is, however she got to that remote location, Tisha was already dead or was under duress when she was taken up the mountain sometime between late October and when the mountain road closed on December 1st of 2002. I harassed the Hood River County Sheriff's Office Investigations Unit until Detective Caitlin Pleas could no longer avoid my calls. There is good news and bad news. The bad news is that Detective Pleas was not at liberty to give me much, if any, information about the case. The good news is that she convinced me that the Tisha Dyer case is an open and active investigation, and it gave me hope that a resolution might be forthcoming. And what about the baby that was presumably born to Tisha and Lorenzo? What happened to it? Detective Pleas told me she has no information about the baby, and she doesn't know whether Tisha's family knew about it. This is somewhat surprising to me. Tisha was 8.5 months pregnant upon her arrest in September 2000. That baby went somewhere. I noted with interest the note on Tisha's court record relating to her February 2001 conviction that she agreed to complete inpatient treatment at the Alpha House program and outpatient program. Alpha House was a residential facility offering services to children and families in need, including the homeless. The judge would not be able to order Tisha to go there. This would have had to have been an agreement entered into between Tisha and the court. The question is whether Tisha had been allowed to keep her baby, and perhaps they went to Alpha House together. As I said, no one seems to know what happened to the baby, and there's no further mention of it in Tisha's subsequent court records. So if all my research turned up accurate results and Lorenzo Jackson could not have killed Tisha because he was incarcerated at the time she was killed, then who did it? We know the two were mixed up in all kinds of felonious and dangerous criminal activity, including drug dealing, identity theft, and so on. Could Tisha have been taken out by someone she had dealings with? If so, why? Or could Lorenzo Jackson have had a reason to pull strings from prison and have Tisha eliminated? Of course, that's rampant speculation, and I have no proof that anything of the sort occurred. It seems that by the time Tisha disappeared, her more sophisticated alias-using forgery and identity theft crimes had come to an end, and she was engaging in petty crimes like stealing things from places like Home Depot and getting caught. What someone's motive to murder her would be remains unknown. I do wonder whether Tisha possibly turned to sex work to support herself and possibly a drug habit and even a baby, and that dangerous profession got her killed. Again, rampant speculation. The Hood River County Sheriff's Office is seeking tips relating to Tisha's homicide, and tipsters can remain anonymous. If you have any information about the slaying of Tisha Ann Dyer, please call 541-387-7077. Thanks for listening to this episode of DNA ID. Before you leave, please let me tell you about some important things related to the show. If you'd like to support this podcast, and in the process, get access to early and ad-free episodes, as well as bonus content like crime scene photos, you can sign up for a Patreon subscription for only $5 a month by heading over to patreon.com/DNAID. Of course, you're welcome to contribute more than $5 a month. We rely on Patreon funds to pay for the original source materials I use to research each episode. If Patreon isn't your thing, you can also show your support with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcasts. It costs just $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year. Your AbJack Insider subscription will give you the same benefits for not only DNA ID, but for all of the shows on the AbJack network, like Killer Communications and Campus Killings. Head over to Apple Podcasts and find the DNA ID page or look for the AbJack network to get started. If you're on social media, we'd love to interact with you there. DNA ID is on every major social media platform. Search your favorite platforms for DNA ID podcast to find us. We also have a YouTube channel, and our website is dnaidpodcast.com. You can find links to all of these anytime in our show notes. If you need to reach the show, contact us by emailing dnaidpodcast@gmail.com. Finally, if you want to pick up some fun DNA ID merch and represent the show, visit the store at www.customizedgirl.com/s/DNA ID podcast. DNA ID is researched, written, and hosted by me, Jessica Betancourt. It's produced by me and Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Music by Connor Betancourt.